Okay, I am going to go ahead and call to order the Longmont Planning and Zoning Commission, June 28th, 2023, optional meeting. Next item is roll call.
Chairman Poland,
Here.
Commissioner Height,
Present.
Commissioner Tedda,
Here.
Commissioner Goldberg,
Here.
Commissioner Flagg,
Here.
Commissioner Lukacs,
Here.
Commissioner Kohler.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Awesome. Next is communications from Planning Director Glenn Van Nimwegen.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I just want to introduce Kristen Coate, who you will hear a presentation from. She's our newest senior planner, started last November, and came to us from Greeley, but with a lot of great experience from there. Another community in Colorado, but a lot of experience in Minnesota as well. So join me in welcoming her. And
Welcome.
be nice.
Next is public invited to be heard. This is first call. This is for items that are not on the agenda for tonight or quasi-judicial matters that will be coming before us in the short term. There is nobody signed up on the list. I will open up in case there's anybody in the audience who would like to come forward. We ask that you state your name and your address, and you get 5 minutes. Seeing nobody come forward, I'll go ahead and close the first call, public invited to be heard. Next, there are no approval of minutes for this meeting. Next is the public hearing item. So this is Sandstone Marketplace Subdivision, filing number 1, replat B, preliminary plat, and consideration of a modification in accordance with LMC 1505150.1.b.I, impacts of level of service. Staff Planner Kristen Coate presenting, or Senior Staff Planner.
Good evening, and thank you, Chairman Pullman and members of the Commission. I do, thank you. As you just stated, this evening for your consideration, you'll be hearing about the Sandstone Marketplace preliminary subdivision plat and a modification on impacts of level of service. As was just introduced, the item before you is a request to consider a subdivision of 24.24 acres of mixed-use regional zone land located at the southeast corner of East Ken Pratt Boulevard, Weld County Line Road, located south of Colorado 119. Some brief history on this property is that it was annexed into the city in 1998 as part of the Maida annexation. It was designated as mixed-use regional center as per the envisioned Longmont Comprehensive Plan and zoned as such. And it was previously subdivided into 5 mixed-use regional lots in 2010. Said subdivision is proposing to offer commercial uses, daycare, medical office space, and senior housing. Current surrounding zoning includes primary employment to the north, residential mixed use to the south, mixed use regional to the east, and unincorporated Boulder County to the west. Mainly primary uses surround this site. Within the subdivision, a mix of both primary and secondary uses are proposed. That mix includes food and beverage service, a daycare, a variety of general retail facilities that do meet the primary use category. The proposed uses within the subdivision also include a medical clinic and multifamily housing, which are secondary uses within the MUR zone district. The subdivision as a whole has been reviewed by city staff in accordance with the DRC review process and found to meet city standards. Individual lots will be required to go through the site plan review process and will be individually examined at the time of their development regarding connectivity, architecture, buffering, etc. This slide gives you an overview of the subdivision request. The applicant is asking to establish 11 lots ranging from 41,802 to 283,408 square feet in size, a 46,000 square foot pocket park, 2 outlots to be used for water quality detention, and 70,879 square feet of right-of-way dedication. As represented by this slide, you will see details regarding the necessary impacts on level of service modification request. Very generally stated, the LOS rating is indicative of the time it takes an individual to complete their trip through an intersection. Section 15.05.150F of Longmont Municipal Code indicates for all subdivisions and developments, the applicant shall demonstrate that with the planned development, the transportation level of service for any signalized intersection located within 1/2 mile of the development shall not fall below a level of service D. In accordance with the traffic impact study submitted with this application, the signalized intersection at Colorado 119 County Line Road is anticipated to have a rating of E level of service by the year 2025, as per the traffic study submitted with this application. Currently, the rating is D. The daytime rating without the approval of this subdivision by the year 2025 is anticipated to be a level of service rating E. That indication would give the appearance that this issue is more of a regional issue than a issue related to the approval of the subdivision. Longmont Municipal Code gives the city decision-making body of such applications the latitude to modify these requirements if the applicant demonstrates that the impacts of the level of service have been mitigated to the maximum extent feasible, or the right to waive the requirements if it determines that the direct and cumulative impacts will be minimal and insignificant. This slide represents some mitigation methods discussed within the traffic impact study regarding the impacts to the levels of service modification request. What is suggested is that with the construction of the County Line Road access is that there include the installation of a stop sign and no left turn sign to warn drivers that the movement is not permitted. There's also the inclusion that the northbound turn lane be designated to a length of 220 feet plus a 120-foot taper to meet City of Longmont standards. There's also discussion about a regional improvement to Colorado 119 to 6 lanes, which is scheduled to occur in the future. Notification and outreach was completed as per municipal code requirements. A neighborhood meeting was held regarding this application in September of 2022. No opposition to this project has been expressed. We have not received any public comments in regards to this proposal. This slide details some development considerations taken into account regarding this project. There are no federal or state protected species on this site. In reviewing the subdivision criteria, this development meets said criteria as outlined in the staff report, is compatible with the surrounding properties, and is generally in conformance with the approved plans put in place at the time of annexation and subsequent approvals for development of surrounding properties. The impacts on the level of service will be mitigated to the maximum extent feasible by the applicant by utilizing the conditions proposed as part of the traffic study. Based on the staff report and the preceding analysis, it is the staff recommendation that the Sandstone Marketplace Subdivision Filing 1 Replat B and the modifications to level of service be approved with the conditions that appropriate stop and no left turn signs be installed with the establishment of this subdivision, and that the developer modify the northbound right turn lane as designated in the traffic study submitted with this application. That concludes my presentation. The applicant has a presentation as well for you this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Applicant, please come forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. We have a brief presentation for the applicant team. Quick introduction, we have a couple folks from Actis, the developer here. Chris Niels, Frank DeSiena, and Richard Groves. Myself, James Waller. Emily Wilson, our landscape architect. And Jeff Plank, our traffic engineer. To give you a brief overview of what it looks like today for the plat, we have 5 lots on site. This was a re-subdivision that occurred a couple years ago with the Davis development to the south. For the proposed plat, as Kristen described, we will be subdividing into 11 lots with the uses that she described and we'll discuss in a minute. 2 outlots that will be used for water quality and detention purposes, and a dedicated public right-of-way that has been discussed with Public Works. Finally, our proposed land uses are shown on the screen in color. As Kristen described, we will have commercial that will be along the north and the western sides of the subdivision. We will have a daycare facility, which will be at the southeast corner of our dedicated public right-of-way and East County Line Road. We'll have a medical office use that will be adjacent to that. The pocket park adjacent, which is in the center of the subdivision. The age-restricted multifamily use that will be just to the east of that. And as I mentioned, the 2 water quality and detention ponds that follow the existing drainage patterns of the site in the southeast and southwest corners of the site. That concludes my presentation for the commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to go ahead, since this is a public item, we'll go ahead and open up public invite to be heard. We do have one member of the community to speak, or at least who has signed up, Zoya Parvaz. Please state your name and address for the records, and you have 5 minutes.
Sure. Zoya Parvaz, 219 Francis Street. You may remember me and some of my friends from last week's Taylor Swift concert of a planning and zoning meeting. We missed you too, and we're glad to be back. We believe that it should be possible to be able to live in Longmont whether you work at Smucker's on the production floor or in the management suite. We believe that a community is stronger when people of all walks of life can put a roof over their heads and sleep without fear. We believe that the way to make this possible is build more housing. On last week's episode, me and my friends were here advocating in favor of a developer who wanted to build 70 units in Bond Farm, and I accused the people providing negative feedback of being obstructionist because they were afraid of change. Some of you agreed with the incorrect argument that an area of change that is next to an area of stability can't be allowed to change in order to protect the character of the neighborhood. Arguments about protecting the character of the neighborhood are generally wrong, and they were about Bond Farm, but they are not wrong with respect to the proposed Sandstone Market subdivision. Reading from the project description in the Planning and Zoning communication prepared for you by staff. The MUR district allows for pedestrian-friendly regional-scale employment, commercial activities, and multifamily residential uses with easy access to public amenities, including public transit. The proposal is to develop the subdivision into an area offering commercial uses, daycare, medical office space, and senior housing. That sounds like a great place to live. However, I believe that the preliminary site plat demonstrates that this development does not preserve the character of the neighborhood around it, and that as a result you should reject it or recommend that developer make changes in the same manner that you did with the developer of Bond Farm. If you look at attachment 2 on the agenda, the preliminary site plan, you will see the developer's sketch of what buildings and uses of land might happen here. You know what I see? A development incompatible with the neighborhood next to it. This development is next to 2 existing residential neighborhoods. To the south is what passes for dense multifamily housing in this country, and to the west is a great example of dense single-family housing. The development being proposed is not consistent with the character of the neighborhood and should be rejected because it fails to provide pedestrian-friendly regional-scale employment and multifamily residential uses with easy access to public amenities. This development is not for pedestrians, it is for cars. How do I know this development is not for pedestrians? Because no sane pedestrian would ever walk to this place. There is nothing in the site plan to provide for ingress or egress of this property using anything but a car. The sidewalks do not even pierce the boundary of the property. You definitely wouldn't want to walk to the Walmart from there, since the Walmart parking lot is a place where pedestrians go to die. This development was not designed with pedestrians in mind and couldn't be bothered to care about the existence of the neighborhood around it. Another way that I know that this development is focused on cars and not people is because if you look at the preliminary site plat, you will notice that 39% of the land in this development has buildings or green space, and that 46% of this land is for parking. There is more space on this piece of land for the storage of cars than for the storage of humans. This does not seem like it advances the sustainability or resiliency of Longmont. As a result, I believe that you should hold this development to the same standard you are holding Bond Farm and reject this request as inconsistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood, which is single-family and multifamily residential. If the people of Bond Farm neighborhood have the right to require less density of people, then the neighborhoods of Sandstone Market have the right to require fewer cars. If you do vote in favor of this development, then you should require that the developer to come back with a new site plan that prioritizes pedestrian, multimodal transit, and mixed-use commercial uses that serve the neighborhood they are in instead of people who are just passing by. If you do not require these changes, then you will be creating a double standard where a small group of people have the right to twist the idea of the character of the neighborhood into being about keeping new people out, but that we're totally okay violating the rights of people as long as there's parking attached. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come forward and speak? And seeing nobody from the public come forward, I'll go ahead and close out the public invited to be heard on this issue. I will now open it up to the commission for questions, clarifications, motions. Commissioner Height.
Who from Longmont Transportation is here this evening?
We do have our transportation engineer here, Caroline Michaels.
Commissioner Height?
How are you?
Good.
Sorry, I know you hate these questions. But I look at this project, and Bryan Avenue. We're timed out. So Bryan Avenue is interesting to me, in its relationship as it enters County Road 1. I know that the level of service issues are really what's driving this, but to me, first and foremost, it strikes me as just weird. Because Latin Drive, which accesses Walmart and the rest of the community back there, seems to be a fairly busy intersection. And we're proposing to put in another one in the midst of deacceleration lanes to get from County Line onto 119 going eastbound, acceleration lanes on southbound County Line Road and I guess southbound turns off of 119, where we're going to have yet just before Latin Drive, people turning left onto Bryan Drive. Does that cause the city traffic engineering department any concern? Just the physical location of Bryan Drive.
So if, it doesn't really show it on the screen there, but there is actually a existing kind of stub out there that was intended to be used as a 3/4 movement access. So it would allow southbound lefts in, but it would not allow westbound lefts out. So it would only be kind of a right out. And that's why that was done. Kristen, this might be a question for you, but I believe there was a previous proposal for this piece that was also commercial, and I think that was probably why it was constructed with that future development in mind. But
I believe you're correct, yes.
In looking at the referral agencies, the solicitations and then responses, there was a solicitation sent to CDOT, but no response from CDOT. Is that unusual?
No, that's not unusual.
it's not particularly unusual. So, and I do have my concern with the existing, channelization island there is that it's not very big. So it doesn't really effectively prevent potentially anyone from making the westbound left turn movement out, which creates an unsafe condition. So I would, some of my comments recommended that be maybe reconstructed to be a little bit of a stronger like median or channelization island treatment to really kind of try to prevent that from happening.
Okay. The staff recommendation, as reflected in the transportation impact study, was an R11 stop sign. The heck is that versus a regular stop
That's
sign?
just a regular stop sign. That's the MUTCD, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. That's just the code. Lots of signs have codes like that, so that's all that means.
Things to know. Are you, I guess, in agreement that a stop sign and a right turn only sign are sufficient to calm this intersection? Or would you suggest a bigger right out only median, whatever that thing is called?
I guess you could maybe reconsider access at this intersection. You could maybe make it full, like right in, right out, instead of allowing the like southbound left in.
Yeah.
Since it was already existing and was kind of already pre-planned for that, kind of allowed it to exist. But yeah, I get like the but I do think it's still preventing the westbound left turn out, which is like probably the highest conflict movement, or a westbound through, although there's no connection on the other side to do that. But
And XL, decel lanes, that's standard. There's
yeah,
enough room.
so that would be, yeah, so I think it's saying that that would be like a northbound right turn lane into that access at Bryan Avenue.
Right. But then right turns onto 119, and I think there's a proposal to have and I don't know if there is one now, a right turn without a light option.
Continuous lane, maybe.
Continuation lane, maybe, is that what it's called?
Continuous lane.
To make a right turn off of County Line northbound onto eastbound 119. If there's that lane and people are merging to go to the right.
Oh, okay, so you're
to make
worried
that-
about like a merge conflict?
Absolutely.
Like people, okay. So it would just probably be, I mean, you could try to design it so that any northbound right turn lane into Bryan Avenue doesn't, it might not continue. Like it might not be one continuous lane. There's different design options. This project's not really at the point where they've done a public improvement plan. So even though I've made the comment to have like maybe a reconstruction of that access, which I think would be a good idea. I don't have any like examples to look at right now of what that could potentially look like, but
And the Maniac merge from Bryan Lane northbound and then trying to go westbound on 119 would be crossing three lanes of traffic to get into those two left turn lanes. An issue or not? Am I just chasing windmills?
yeah, I mean, I could see that's like I mean, County Line is the lower volume road in this scenario as opposed to Ken Pratt, East Ken Pratt. But, and I think, I'm trying to like, volumes on County Line south of East Ken Pratt are not exceedingly high compared to some arterials. But, yeah, it is like that's a lot of merge lane to potentially go through. So I think it's a potentially valid concern.
Okay. Let's talk about levels of service then for a moment. We're at D now, and it goes to E regardless of this subdivision? Is that
Yes, that's what the traffic impact study says.
in 2 years, in 2025?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything below E? Does it go to F?
Yes.
It does. So this won't take it to F.
That's not, I don't believe that's in the level of service calculations, but maybe eventually, but, and if we are talking about, I mean, quite frankly, it's a very busy intersection, and, a lot of capacity improvements have been done already. There's potentially more that could be done, but, we already have like dual left turn lanes that add capacity, and those are already protected only lefts, so that's a potential like safety improvement that's already been done, so.
Thank you. The applicant's traffic engineer would be great to come next.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Plank, Kimley Horn, helped prepare the traffic study, 6200 South Syracuse Way, Greenwood Village, Colorado 80111.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. Would write in, write out only work for you guys? What happened?
Well, the current proposal is for three-quarter movements, which allows a left in. Did I do something?
I don't know if you did or not. I don't know if it matters.
Apologize for that.
It's okay. I don't think the
Nuggets aren't playing tonight,
Picture
so
picture was nice. So yeah, write in, write out only. And you're thinking that the left end from southbound county line is necessary to your needs?
yeah, I mean, it helps distribute the traffic flows internal to the site and allow access for more than two locations, or for two locations. If you restrict it, then you have to go all the way around to Tim Way or Common Drive. And so that left in prevents having to distribute traffic into around the corner and more traffic on Slayton Drive, which you want to avoid. And since it operates at, that movement operates at level service B, I don't feel that there's any reason to not include that. It fits vehicle queuing standpoint, back-to-back left turn lanes with the northbound lefts at the major intersection, State Highway 119 and County Line, and then the southbound left into the site. And so there's no vehicle queue issues or level service.
So would there be a left turn lane in county line and a queue?
Yes, it's actually constructed today.
It's there.
It
Okay.
is there.
All right. I didn't appreciate that, even though I live right there. Okay, thank you. That's my question for the time being.
Should I stay up here? It is traffic, but.
Well, no. Next, Commissioner Teta. Oops. Wait. There you go.
I had a question for our traffic person. No, yes. What's her name? Carolyn, thank you.
Commissioner Tutta?
Thanks, Carolyn. So that got me thinking. I go through that intersection both directions often enough. If you're going south, you're coming from two lanes in the southbound direction, and you cross, and you have one through lane on the left side, and the right-hand lane ends, and you have to merge. So I'm hearing we have a dedicated left-hand turn lane. Would anything else change about that through lane or that right lane that you have to merge from? Seems like the intersection is more developed on the north side than on the south side, and this would be a great opportunity to develop it to the same extent. Am I wrong about that?
So when you say it's more developed on the, which intersection is more developed?
County
which
line
side?
on the
Okay.
north side of Ken Pratt
Oh, okay, yeah.
is more fully formed, it feels like, with two lanes in each direction, plus the merge from Ken Pratt
Okay.
West and the merge from County Line to Ken Pratt West.
Okay, so you're asking, I believe you're asking about the ultimate, like, build-out section of, like, County Line Road?
Maybe on the west
Okay.
side more than anything. On the,
Okay. I don't think there's not any current CIP. Boulder County, there is a Boulder County County Line Road Master Plan, but I don't have that on me, so I can't reference it to see what the recommended ultimate section is. But, so are you just asking if that's going to be done or whether it's beneficial to like complete that improvement with this development or?
Yes, yes. Thank you, though. I realize there's probably no answer.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, like current CIP to build out county line roads south of Ken Pratt, although if any of the other engineers in the room know otherwise, they're free to correct me, but
Thank you, Carolyn.
thank you.
Commissioner Lukacs?
Thank you, Chair. Carolyn. Let's see. So, still on traffic. Just want to make sure I understood everything in the traffic impact study and what you guys requested, and it's going to be done. With this Latin Drive and County Road 1, there's a proposal to have a signalized intersection there, right? To have lights. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a potential improvement.
So if it was recommended by this traffic study, it doesn't mean that it might get implemented right away or?
I actually might defer to the applicant about the actual like traffic signal warrant, but.
Yeah, we did a signal warrant evaluation in the event that it did open up to full movement. Currently, the west leg doesn't allow full movements, even though the traffic counts did show people making illegal left movements at that intersection. But it is a good candidate for spacing for a signal. It met all 4 warrants with the rerouting of traffic to have signal control with the 4-hour warrants being met.
And who's going to build that? The city or you? Or?
I mean, that hasn't been determined in the development agreement yet, and so every jurisdiction is different with how that contribution share is done, and that's typically outside of the scope of the traffic study, but we can provide traffic contributions to share when that potentially occurs in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I live maybe like a mile north of that, so I see that intersection a lot. And there's that neighborhood to the west that could use a better, safer connection for all modes, not just cars, but even pedestrians that are trying to cross. So I'm in favor, or I would like to see a signalized intersection there. That would make everyone safer.
Yeah, that west leg currently doesn't have the best circulation plan on that west side, and so vehicles have to reroute, and rerouting on the street system is never desirable. So our warrant analysis did show it would meet without the project traffic as well. Not that the project traffic doesn't contribute, but it's not triggered by the project traffic.
Okay. And with Bryan Avenue and County Road 1, we said there's going to be a stop sign. Is that just for the traffic incoming into County Road, or would County Road have a stop sign as well? Is it a 3-way stop, or is just one stop sign?
County Line Road has too much volume.
Right.
Major artery, you're not going to stop that. It's just stopping the single leg on the east leg. The right turn movement only is permitted on that, stopping that right turn movement. Okay. And so they would have a stop. Okay. And so there's not an acceleration lane plan there that, not desirable from a standpoint of approaching the intersection to the north and having vehicle weaving. So it's best to have a stop and have vehicles go when they're able to, rather than have an acceleration with a merge.
Right.
It was going the other direction, because then you're a lot further away from a signal. Then an acceleration lane makes more sense because you're going away from a signalized intersection. Mm-hmm. But that would be the other leg.
And let's talk about pedestrian traffic, because I see all these traffic impact studies and they don't consider any pedestrian, bicyclists as numbers, which could go in your favor. You know, it might not go to level E because more people will use other modes of transportation rather than a motor vehicle. And I do see in your plan here that you will use some current sidewalks that are there, some new ones. Can you talk about that? Because we had some public talking about pedestrian access and how walkable that place will be. So could you
Yeah,
talk about that a little?
That question's a little bit more geared toward the civil, so the traffic impact study doesn't do the design of that, so I'll defer to the civil and the sidewalk implementation of that.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
We are proposing to use all the existing sidewalk that goes around the Sandstone Marketplace subdivision on County Line 119 and Common Drive. We're proposing to maintain it to the developed condition. That meaning if it was cracked or falling apart, it's the developer's responsibility to build it back, to provide ADA compliant paths. Connecting on for the proposed development, we are proposing to update the curb ramps that are along Bryan Avenue and County Line Road to current city standards. We're also providing an ADA compliant sidewalk that's going to run the whole north side of Bryan Avenue with a crosswalk that will be connected to the Pocket Park. That proposed sidewalk that's going to run along Bryan Avenue will connect pedestrians from County Line Road to Common Drive.
And what's that Common Drive? Where is that?
Common Drive is the eastern right-of-way. Zlatan turns and Common Drive runs north-south on the east side of the subdivision.
Isn't that Tim's Way? Or is
Yes.
that a different
So,
name for it?
Tim
Okay.
Way, there was a whole discussion about this. Tim Way is the name of the street south of that intersection. Common Drive is north of the intersection.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
That was good. And I think this next question I have, it might be for you, Carolyn. Because I did request some crash data, which I've seen come through our emails. And specifically that intersection of Ken Pratt Boulevard, 119, and County Road 1 is a significant place for crashes. It's like, it feels like every month there's a crash there at least. And I know that's kind of split jurisdiction with CDOT and then counties and all that. So, and you mentioned a lot of improvements have been done that could be done. Are there more that could be done and more that are planned?
So Commissioner Lukacs, so that is correct. You were sent the City of Longmont crash report covering 5 years from 2017 to 2021. County Line Road and Highway 119 or Ken Pratt Boulevard is a high crash intersection. There are, I don't have the exact breakdown. I was looking at like the crash diagram before this meeting. That does include quite a few rear ends. So, and that's, rear ends are sort of, they kind of come with traffic signals a lot of the time. It's just high volume. They're just probably going to happen. There are some broadsides or right angle T-bone. People call them different things. I think there's a few left turn conflicts, but like I said earlier, there are dual left turn lanes for all approaches, so they're all protected only. So at that point, it's not because of like a permissive left turn phasing, it's people probably running it. There's potentially some improvements you can make with timing, to maybe try to like funnel people out, give a little bit more time to the left turn, maybe reduce frustration. But at that point, you're kind of hitting a lot of the like bigger improvements have already been done. So, and you could potentially increase, there's probably some room on the east and westbound approach to maybe make the left turn lanes even longer to increase storage. But I don't is that gonna help the crash problem? Maybe not so much. At this point, yeah, we're kind of dealing with a regional highway and an arterial. So, there are potential improvements you could do. Now, whether they're in the scope of this development, I mean, you could just go, full grade separation, potentially, and just eliminate, movement conflicts entirely, but, that would be a very large regional project.
Okay. And does CDOT have any plans? I saw that mentioning that CDOT has a plan to increase to 6 lanes or something like that.
So that is like a long-term plan to increase, 3 through lanes each direction on East Kemprat Boulevard. There's not really it's like a long-term improvement. I don't have a solid timeline on when that would actually happen.
And that would not necessarily help the crash data, would be more helping the level of service.
Yeah, that would be like a level of service improvement, not necessarily a crash rate improvement.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldberg.
Thanks, Chairman. Carolyn, I think I have a few questions for you. Kristen, I might need your assistance too, but we'll kind of take it one at a time. Carolyn, just so that I'm 100% clear, the troublesome intersection is not necessarily Bryan or Zlatin. The level D rating is at 119 and County Line. Is that correct?
Yes, so the level of service benchmarks by our code apply. So we're only really applying those benchmarks to signalized intersections.
Got it. Okay. And is that in all 4 directions, or is it only D north-south and not east-west?
So there are, there's like an overall level of service. The individual movements do have like associated, like
Sure.
the eastbound left, northbound left. I'd have to like kind of pull that up
Sure.
and see exactly what they are. At some point, if they're small enough movements, they might not even, so if it's, the benchmark requirement reads that it has to be at least 5% of like the total traffic at the intersection
Yes.
to count as like a benchmark failure. So if it's, say, if one movement's so small, like no one's, for example, the northbound left turn is so small compared to, say, the east or westbound, which I'm just kind of pulling this,
Sure.
making this up. I'm not using like specific examples. And it might not even count because it's generally not worth it, or considered not worth it to potentially take away time from like a very high volume, like east-west through movement
Sure.
to service like a very small number of cars.
Okay. That's great. Can you tell me examples of other D or E rated intersections in our town? How about we just stay on 119? How about, what's 119 in Maine? Is that,
Yeah, that's,
what's that rated? I mean, just,
yeah, during peak hours, yeah, you're gonna have movements that are D or E,
okay.
most likely.
The rating that we're reviewing here today, is this during peak hours or like all times?
So traffic impact studies are usually examining AM and PM peak hours.
Got it. Okay. In the middle of the day, we're not worried about this D rating. It's the peak hours in the morning and in the evening.
That is, yes, that's traditionally what's considered.
Okay. So there are other examples of D or E ratings, Maine and 119 being maybe an example of one. What about like Hover and 119? Is that a highly graded or low graded intersection?
Yeah, I know like Nelson and Hover as well.
Nelson and
has-
Hover. Okay,
Yeah, that
great.
has some
That's a
lower
rating.
lower levels of service, especially during like PM peak periods, so.
Do you have any other examples, just for the sake of myself and the rest of the commissioners?
There's a lot of them are like, the highway arterial, like intersections, Main and 66.
Yeah, sure.
Like you said, Main
sure.
and Kemprat. I know Nelson and Hover, where you just have very high volumes and even sometimes when you do make certain changes to the left turns, sometimes that can actually, when you don't allow permissive left turns, that can sometimes make level of service worse because you're moving fewer cars like through the intersection, but it can increase safety. So sometimes that's a trade-off as well.
Sure. I think I asked for the other examples because admittedly, we're told that this thing is rated a D, and if I brought home a D from when I was a kid to my parents, they'd be really mad at me, right? And so I feel like how silly would it be for us to approve a project that's going to drive a D to an E? But I think I find comfort knowing that this is kind of the result of just having a growing city and a major thoroughfare, and other kind of critical intersections in town also have these lower ratings. It's not necessarily a reflection of like poor design maybe, or poor decision making, or poor planning. It's just, this is the sign, this is us growing and Longmont becoming more populated maybe.
I would agree, especially on something like Ken Pratt or 66 or 287, where not everyone using those roads is necessarily even lives or works in Longmont. They're used as
Right,
thoroughfares
they're
to
coming
get
and
through the
going
city.
through.
So it's also influenced by, I know so when they say like the background level of service is going to be lower, that's usually based on like a regional growth number, like usually from Denver Council of Regional Governments, I know has like estimates on this, where it's like, 2% growth, and that's, surrounding area assuming might build out, the other corners of this intersection might build out too, so it's kind of accounting for some of that stuff that might happen in the future, and not so much, I guess, maybe accounted for in the traffic study, but there's also growth in communities around Longmont as well that also contribute to, quite frankly, traffic on our highways, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as a commission, we have precedent of approving projects even when the impact to the traffic level of service ratings will lead to dropping it, sometimes low. I remember sitting here, and I think we have an F intersection in our city. Maybe it's Quail Road in Maine or something like that. It's kind of a tough one, but anyway, so I think we've had examples of where we've had to or have felt inclined to approve a project, even if it has a negative impact on the level of service there. I guess my question is, maybe this goes to Kristen, what other developable land is there in this area? Meaning, if we approve today and we say, yeah, it's cool, that intersection is going to become an E anyways, but are we going to be 6 months from now or a year from now, are we going to be sitting here with another project that's going to make it go from an E to an F? What other properties might we be contending with in the future?
Well, in that general vicinity, there are several other properties that are developable, but they are actually under some phase of development right now. Not all of them, but several of them. A lot of the city of Longmont is developed out, with the exception of some areas along 119, 66, and some small areas within the city itself. So there are some tracks within this generalized area adjacent to 119 that don't have development on them right now, are not under development, and there are some pieces that are currently under development at this time. So it's really hard to say, if we're going to be facing a greater impact by future development on this signalized intersection. I would say in this very generalized area, there isn't anything that is not currently being developed that is under any proposal to be developed that would have an impact. And I do know that the intersection at the Brickstone Apartments, I believe it's 3rd Avenue and Ken Pratt, was a very similar situation to this in regards to the level of service situation at that signalized intersection. I believe it went from a D to an E.
Yeah.
My understanding.
And just to be clear, any traffic study that we have before us today does not take into consideration any future developments or anything that's like in the works. We're only talking about what was the case on the day of the study.
That is 100% correct. Anything in the future would have to be evaluated at that time. Any subdivisions would come with their own traffic study, which would evaluate their impact and any developments that had happened in the interim, and would go before you as a board for that consideration. So that is correct.
Okay. Carolyn, another quick question. When will 119 be expanded to 6 lanes? I understand it's under CDOT's purview, and in their packet it said, we don't know, but are we talking 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Is there any way to look at that magic 8 ball and tell us what to expect?
I don't know, but I would say more, 10 years at least.
10 years at least.
Yeah, like potentially more.
Got it.
So I don't think it's like it's not something where, we have plans that are just waiting to be constructed. It's something where I've never seen a plan set for it. So we're talking years.
So when we're
sure.
making our decision today, we should really kind of make the decision based off of the current 119 scenario, knowing that
Yeah.
it'll be at least 10 or more years
Yeah.
before we see any improvements there.
Yeah, and I guess some clarification. So that when applicants complete traffic impact studies, they are required to do field counts, and everything's kind of based upon that like base number. Even if they're applying, say, oh well, we're going to assume traffic on 119 increases 2%. They're going from a baseline.
I see. Okay. Kristen, in the and I don't know if it was your team or if it was Carolyn's team that steered this decision, but staff recommended approval with some improvements to the right-of-ways, which meant that you confirmed, or your team feels, that it's a minimal or insignificant impact on the neighborhood or on the area. Can you, just for the record, again, just clarify why you feel good and what confidence we should have in this being minimal and insignificant?
Yes, certainly. Based on the traffic study's indication that given whether or not the subdivision occurs, the impact is still going to be that signalized intersection receives an LOS rating of an E. That was very indicative that this is more of a regional issue than an issue that's based on this generalized development. And that was the reasoning for the recommendation of approval of this subdivision, because the impacts will be minor in regards to the actual loss of service at the signalized intersection. And also there is the statement that we're mitigating to the maximum extent feasible, and there's very few items within that traffic study which the applicant can utilize as mitigation methods within this traffic study.
Okay.
So the items proposed as conditions would be possible mitigation items that they could utilize, but there are not many that are within their power. The ultimate being the increase in Colorado 119 to 6 lanes, but that is obviously outside of our purview and within more CDOT's power than the city's. So that is not something that we could condition as per this application.
Cool. Well, just kind of to wrap up from my side, in general, I'm very supportive of the project, and I think that's a good place to have the project before us. I like the diversity of land uses that they're bringing and the mix of inventory that's coming into that area. I think that's good and a good place for it. And I find comfort in the decline in level of service, because I see this as a kind of a major thoroughfare, and this is just part of our growing city. That said, I'm not so quick to write off whether we should be making a decision based on it being a regional problem or a local problem. I do think that kind of the reason why we're up here is to say, okay, well, maybe it checks all of the boxes, but there's these other extenuating circumstances that we need to consider. So, before I make any motion, I'd be curious to hear from the rest of the commission on their feelings about the decline in level of service and whether we should be so concerned about it being a regional problem or a local problem.
Thank you. Commissioner Flake?
Thank you, Chair. I think I need to talk with someone from the development side, the developer, regarding the profile of Bryan Avenue. Someone speak to that? You don't have an illustration of that in your submittal?
Sorry about that. Good evening. Can you repeat your question for the discussion about Bryan Avenue?
What is your proposed profile of that street?
Oh, the profile, so that was discussed with, the Public Works Division. Is gonna be a crowned road. It's gonna be a modified local commercial roadway. It's gonna have one lane on each side, and curb and gutter on each side.
And no sidewalk?
Sidewalk is along the north side of Bryan Avenue. It is not along the south side.
Why is it not along the south side?
It was not a requirement that was deemed by Public Works, and we felt that with developments coming in and for the pad lots, they would be providing crosswalks across Bryan Avenue that will be providing the best pedestrian ADA access to the site, where we didn't feel like at this time it was in the city or our client's best interest to put in sidewalk ramps at different locations where we don't know where a development's driveway is going to come, where it may be the best position for a pedestrian to access our site in a safe manner.
And tell me about what contribution you make to sidewalks along the other street, whatever you're going to call it, on the east side of your property?
Common Drive, as it is now, there's an existing sidewalk that runs north-south from Ken Pratt down to Zlatin Drive.
And is it on the side that you're going to develop?
It is on the site that we're developing, yes. Our
And-
site is surrounded by sidewalk internal to our site, yeah.
Except for on the north side the south side of Bryan Avenue.
Except for the south side of Bryan Avenue.
And where are you proposing to have senior housing?
Senior housing is to be along the south side of Bryan Avenue. But with that, we are proposing to, we are working with an applicant that is interested in the senior housing lot, where we are going to be dedicating sidewalk that is going to connect from Common Drive over to the Pocket Park that will service the senior housing.
But not down to the health center?
The Pocket Park is adjacent to it, and let me verify in here. There's parking that's along the Pocket Park, and across there we are going to be providing a sidewalk stub, per se, that the medical office use will be able to attach to.
And how wide is that sidewalk?
5 feet, 5 foot minimum.
So does that work for two wheelchairs crossing abreast?
That is the minimum city requirement.
But does that work well for two wheelchairs crossing abreast?
We have, yes.
Okay. Tell me about your relationship to existing bike lanes throughout the city of Longmont and your connectivity to them.
There are existing bike lanes that are along County Line Road. I believe there is one on Highway 119. That's scary in my book. I'm not biking on it. And then I'm not sure for the one on Common Drive, if there is one or not. Off the top of my head, I would have to look at an aerial. We are not providing any bicycle lanes that are along Bryan Avenue. It was not deemed a requirement by the Public Works Division when we were building out the dedicated public right-of-way for Bryan Avenue.
Okay. And do you anticipate the use of bicycles at all on your site?
Yes, it is a city requirement for most uses to have bike racks on site.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn, can we talk briefly?
Commissioner Flake?
Yes, I'm a little concerned that we don't have sidewalks on both sides in the public right-of-way on Bryan Avenue, particularly with any kind of a proposal for senior citizens and a park, and then there's healthcare. So what was the motivation behind that? Because usually Longmont's pretty good about having these detached sidewalks and tree lawns, and aren't there going to be any of that?
So, guess, I'm not sure on like the site itself. I don't know if, might pass that off to Rachel.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rachel with Public Works Engineering. This is also my first time being up here, so I'm a little nervous.
Oh, no.
But so when this application first came in, they kind of proposed, we were between doing a local drive, which would be public right-of-way, and a private drive. And part of the reason why we wanted it to be a local drive is because we knew that a lot of the public would be using it. It wouldn't just be for private access. And that also came with the understanding that this is kind of a limited lot, so the entire development is a little smaller. So it kind of came in with the understanding that it would be a modified section. So we kind of were a little bit lenient in that. So that's why we didn't provide sidewalk on the south. And we also anticipated that there would be a lot of multimodal connections as individual lots come in for development.
And multimodal being?
Biking, walking, so just interconnectivity between each lot.
Okay, and you have, so what do you anticipate might be the usage, say, of a senior that walks? Is there a provision for that person, if they're fit, to actually walk? If they have a test that they have to go to at the hospital that's on the northwest side, they might say, oh, there are sidewalks. How are your crossings going to be across, say, 119 or wherever for this individual, should they decide? And I don't know if you know many older people, but I do. Mm-hmm. And they can decide stuff.
Yes. So I would say, like referring to 119 specifically, it's all signalized. You can click a button and you can cross. Internally, we will have mid-block crossings along Bryan Avenue. So if you're along like the southern side, you'll be able to cross to the north and utilize the sidewalk on the north side. Additionally, this is something that we would look at more when each individual site plan comes in, but we would like maybe require that the senior center provide a sidewalk connection to the health facility.
I see. And will there be any, just be traffic controlled by stop signs rather than any kind of signal?
I don't anticipate any stop signs along Bryan Avenue, just because it's not a very long road. I anticipate the speed limit will probably be 25 miles per hour or less. We could do speed bumps. We could do pedestrian warning signs at those mid-block crossings too.
Have you thought of doing bulb outs?
We could look at that,
okay.
But I don't think we've specifically looked at it yet.
And do you know anything that contributes about bike lanes and connections to bicycle paths in the area?
There is bike lanes along Zlayton and County Line Road, and there's not a specific designated bike lane along Bryan Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions for Kristen. I just want to go over, so there are basically two items that we are going through. One is the replat of the preliminary plat, and the second is the impacts and level of service, and basically to give them dispensation on that.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, is the city worried, or is there any concern of the secondary use becoming more than 50%? Is that handled on a case-by-case basis whenever the lots are developed?
That is handled on a case-by-case basis. There have been some calculations done, currently, although we obviously do not know many of the users that would be proposing to be within the subdivision. But we do know that there's approximately within that generalized area for the same zoned district, there's approximately 20 acres that would be available for secondary uses. But that is evaluated on a site-by-site basis as developers come forward to develop those properties.
Okay, and then one of the review criteria is the transportation plan, and at a preliminary plat level,
Correct.
all we're really talking about are where are the roads,
Yes.
and ingress and egress, and we don't get into the nuts and bolts on bike lanes or how individual things are going to actually work out, because each individual lot could have its own ingress egress onto, let's say, Bryan Street.
Correct, that is correct.
Okay. That's all I have for right now.
All right.
Commissioner Height.
Goes around, comes around. So I think everybody's asked some questions except Commissioner. So Colin down at the end. I'm still troubled with the traffic. What with Bryan Lane as it meets County Line Road 1. I think what I just heard as well is that, you know, it's designed to be a small road. It's designed to provide interconnectivity between lots. People are going to make that left-hand turn southbound into there to cut through to the larger regional portions of what's going on in that neighborhood. Frankly, they're going to get into Walmart from this road. And I don't think that that's in anyone's best interest. I also think, so I'm convinced myself that right in, right out is appropriate for Bryan Drive. Going back to the public's comment, Zoya's observation that this is an appropriate use of land within the community, I want to point out that it's MUR, which is a mixed-use regional center zoning, which requires that we deal with the commercial and retail needs of the community first and foremost, and secondarily address issues like residential, and even the medical facility is supposed to be a secondary use in the MUR zoning district. I find that this proposed plat, this replat, the subdivision proposal meets that criterion, at least for the internal workings of the land that's being subdivided. There's commercial uses being proposed, and I think that the multifamily retirement community as well as the medical facility are below the 49% threshold. So I'm overall in support of this thing, but I'm going to propose adoption of PZR 2023-5B, which is the conditional approval with the conditions that's set forth by planning. In section 1.5, subsections 1 and 2, 1 being that the developer include stop signs and no left turns. 2, that the developer construct the County Line Road access from Bryan Avenue to include a designated 220-foot, that have a right turn lane designed to be at least 220 feet long, plus with a 120-foot taper to meet current standards. And I'm going to add in 3, that Bryan Lane be also right in, right out off of northbound County Line Road. And that's my proposal.
Did you make a formal motion there?
I call it a proposal, but we'll restate it as a formal proposal.
Motion. Okay. Commissioner Kolar.
I do have,
Since we do have a motion on the floor, we need to see if we have a second for the motion before we go through any further discussion. We need to,
I wasn't going to say.
okay. Then can you wait until we see if we have a second for the motion? And it doesn't look like we have anybody coming along on that motion. So we'll go back to the motion fails, and we'll go back to discussion. Commissioner Kolar?
I don't have as many concerns about traffic. I do have some concerns about the pedestrian access. Like Commissioner Flagg was alluding to, there'll be a senior home or facility here. Seems pretty likely they might want to go to Walmart. There's a great trail system around Sandstone. But I can actually see, I'm looking at Google Earth, I can actually see how a pedestrian would get across Common Drive to the Walmart and then across from the Walmart over to Sandstone. And I don't know if this is at the final plat or if the preliminary plat is the time to address these, but yeah, from a safe in a wheelchair access, I don't see how that's possible, and I think that should be considered if it's the right time in this application.
All right. Thank you. We could, would you like our traffic engineer to address your concerns in regards to the crossing? Commissioner Kohler? Would you like our traffic engineer to discuss your concerns in the crossing over to Walmart?
Yeah, or the applicant, if anyone
Certainly,
knows
yep.
the details of that, that'd be great.
Commissioner Kohler, this is a more general comment, I guess, about pedestrian access. While it is true that, since I'm bringing this up because we had a member of the public come and speak about pedestrian access, it is true that 119 and County Line is a signalized intersection and there is pedestrian phasing. I would say those are quite, due to the size of the intersection, the crossings are quite long. So the sort of the comfort of that crossing probably would not be particularly high. There are potentially some mitigations you can make. You could allot for more time on the pedestrian phase, but there's probably not too much to be done as far as the actual like physical distance of that crossing. And I don't have, as far as like there is a regional trail system in this area, but I don't believe the underpass is quite a ways east, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think it would be particularly accessible from.
But
this
I'm
location.
talking about going east from this lot to the Walmart in Sandstone, not crossing 119. So basically crossing Common and Layton Drive over to Sandstone. Is there any way for a pedestrian to get?
I would have to look at the civil plans. I mean, there's probably some existing like pedestrian ramps, but I don't recall any like proposed like striped crosswalks on Common Drive. But it's a potential improvement that could be done. But that's all I have.
And what does the raised crosswalk look like? What is that?
So a raised crosswalk would be like a speed table that also has like crosswalk striping across it.
Oh, it does have this striping. So
Yes.
the traffic.
Or well, there's different designs. You could have just the raised and not have the bars across it, but yes.
It seems like the applicant might want to say something.
Okay, and we'll pass off to the applicant.
So there's two mid-block crossings currently on Common Drive. One's just on the south side of the south axis for the Walmart, and then there's one between that south axis to Zlayton in the mid-block. And so there's two pedestrian crossings. And then as far as vehicles travel cutting through this Bryan from the southbound left, I don't see any reason for that to occur because there's a lot of curvature and slow speeds along Bryan. When anyone making that southbound left would have to be coming from the north or the west, and they would easily just enter from Common to enter the Walmart. And so there's no reason to make that movement for a cut-through perspective.
Can you explain those crossings on Common? They're raised? Is that what the...
They're not raised. They're pedestrian crossings that paint pavement markers with the south side of the access and then between the mid-block, between the access.
Yeah, I'm looking at the imagery and I didn't see them, but maybe this was old and they haven't been painted or something like that. But
Yeah, the current imagery with near map has them up, so. Yeah, right there. Right there. Share.
yeah, that'd be great.
Can you share that?
Got it. So there's a connection here And a connection here. That is different colored pavement, I believe. That's what it looks like. One more. And there's one right here.
Do you know if there's one that goes over to Sandstone?
Across the site.
Well, on the east side of Walmart. So, if they cross there to the Walmart sidewalks, could they get over to Sandstone? Okay.
Yeah, there's the intersection there.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Commissioner Teta.
Okay. I have a question for Carolyn again. Carolyn, if we entertain Commissioner Height's motion to eliminate a left turn from southbound county line onto Bryan, cars could still make a left turn onto Slayton, yes? And is there a dedicated left turn lane to Slayton from southbound county line?
Actually not. I have to look at the aerial. I don't remember. But or if there's. Because it might exist. Yes, there is. Okay. Yeah, so if you're talking about the southbound left from County Line Road to Slayton Drive, there's
Okay.
an existing left turn lane there.
Thank you. Okay, that's all. In that case, just in the interest of discussion, I think that there is enough opportunity for southbound traffic on County Line to either make the left and go east on Ken Pratt and then turn south on Common, or go beyond Bryan and make the left on Slayton without mucking things up too much with having people crossing lanes of traffic on Bryan there. Yes.
So there's 4 blocks here, frontages of 4 different roads. And if you remove that access, you're only gonna be able to gain access from Common only. That's one road with access. Yes, there is right in, right out there, but it's not allowing movements from the north or the west. And so everyone would have to go all the way around the block on Zayton into Common, and then you're overloading Common Drive, and access would only be allowed along Common Drive. And so anyone on the site that wants to get to the west side of the site would have to go all the way around the block and then cut through Bryan, providing additional traffic internal to the site. Or from the west on State Highway 119, because you make a right and then not if you're on the west side of the site, because then you'd go past and then backtrack all the way through the site on a local street, which is designed for 1,500 vehicles likely, and then that's going to increase traffic on that local street to backtrack through the site. There'll certainly be people that.
See what you're saying, that on the west side, it's sloped, isn't it? Is it flat? I guess it's sloped further to the south. It's relatively flat, isn't it? Your site, where you're proposing to build?
Yes. So there'll certainly be people that do the right on Common, even if they're coming from State Highway 119, more for people that are on the east side of the site and more for people that prefer to do right turn movements instead of a left movement. But that left movement, County Line Road has a lot less vehicle volume on it than State Highway 119. During the peak hour, you have about 300 vehicles on County Line, where you have about 1,500 on 119. And so when you have 300 opposing movements for a left in, that's why it only has level service B. 300 may seem like a big number, but you divide that by 60, you only have 5 vehicles passing in a minute. And so there's a lot of vehicle gaps, level service B, and the movements along county line are a lot easier than State Highway 119.
Southbound county line become one mandatory turn on the Great Western going back to the west. So there's a merge point right there. If you're gonna throw in a left-hand turn on top of that, it just seems to me, and I guess I'm sticking to that story, that's unreal, that's gonna be trouble.
So the southbound movement doesn't have any impact to the southbound through movement that is being trapped right there in that image with the right turn movement there with a forced right turn. Doesn't have any impact with the southbound left into the site, because to make that left in, you have to yield to the right of way of the northbound through movement. So the southbound through on that.
But there's two lanes coming south that merge into one at the same point where you're gonna have a left turn lane. Which, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, is that left to, can we blow this map? Can we move this map so it looks a little smaller? There we go. And zoom in again. Because that's the cutout right there.
Yep.
It's already there. Zoom in more. There's already a left turn lane there.
Yep, left turn lane's already there.
For all intents and purposes.
Yes.
Because that's obviously not used now, it's left turn lane. But it already exists. With the pinch point that I'm concerned about being a little bit south.
Okay, Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I think, as always, I appreciate the discussion among the commissioners, and I appreciate the applicant coming here and bringing this project to us. I think in the end, I've already shared my feelings about the project. I think it's bringing what we need in the right part of our town. And Commissioner Height confirmed that to our members of the public who are concerned about residential needs or appropriate usage of the land. I think he did a better job explaining why it's appropriate than I'll be able to. So I'll stick with my talk track here, which is given the fact that this has met the review criteria, given the fact that it's met the subdivision plat review criteria, given our discussion around level of service, traffic implications, kind of other parts of Longmont where we see some of these lower graded intersections, and maybe future improvements down 119, but we won't hold too close to those. But for all of these reasons that we've discussed and all the reasons that I've already shared earlier in the discussion, I'll go ahead and move that we approve PZR 2023-5B with the two conditions as written in our packet.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? I will go ahead and second the motion. Is there any other further discussion, questions? Commissioner Flagg?
While I agree with Commissioner Goldberg on many things that he said, part of a first plat review is looking at access through the site, and where you have public right-of-way dedication and you're expecting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a number of businesses plus a residential component that involves seniors that generally do walk quite a bit, and then no provision made until a site or area gets developed along the entire south side of the main road that goes through the development is very concerning to me. And I would hate to have another such submittal come in without enough right-of-way to accommodate a public sidewalk on both sides of a street and provision for a tree lawn. These are things that generally are usual in Longmont. And not having that, I don't think that I can fully support this preliminary plat.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Flagg. I appreciate your concerns, and they certainly resonate. Kristen, could you remind me, just to make sure that I feel comfortable moving forward, about any potential opportunities for us to review the kind of transportation opportunities, the pedestrian opportunities within this project as it continues to build out? Could you just...
Certainly, certainly. So this is the preliminary plat, and you are the decision-making body on a preliminary plat. The applicant will then make their, depending upon how your decision goes tonight, will then make a application for final plat. That will then go to you as a planning commission, as a recommendation board, and city council as a final decision maker. There will obviously be more detail in that. They will then, individually, the sites will then develop under a site plan review process, which does take into account all of Longmont's codes and requirement regarding connectivity, and pedestrian safety and pedestrian connectivity throughout the site, although that does not come again to the planning commission for additional reviews. There would be potential, dependent upon uses, if something would be a use that required public hearings, there would be potential that you would see those applications, but then again, that would be dependent upon the use and the development of the site. But your opportunities would be at final plat.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
If I could, just one correction. Everything she said was crystal clear, but you would not see a final plat. That would be administrative in the city council, or the mayor basically signs off on the final plat.
Got it. So if there was a time when we wanted to require a sidewalk on the southern side of Bryan Avenue, on the south side of Bryan Avenue, for example, that would have to happen tonight, and otherwise it may not come up again.
It'd be my opinion, it'd be tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kolar?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Commissioner Goldberg if he'd be willing to amend his motion to approve PZRB with the addition of a requirement for a sidewalk on the south side of Bryan Avenue.
I'm sorry, could I please have our civil engineer come down? Maybe both the applicant and the city staff? I'll start with the city staff. And I'm embarrassed, I don't remember your first name. Would you tell me again?
Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate it. Rachel, can we talk about this southern aspect of Bryan Avenue one more time and the sidewalk? I think you mentioned that kind of space is tight in this property, and so your team was inclined to offer a little bit of flexibility, and which I think resulted in the sidewalk only on the northern aspect of Bryan Ave. That said, there would be appropriate times to cross Bryan Ave, like over on the west side at County Line. There'll be a crosswalk or a way to cross safely to that sidewalk and then make your way through the project. I know that it's tight. Is there a way? Can we require? Is it an enforceable condition that we could make to require a sidewalk on the southern aspect of Bryan Avenue?
I would say yes. I think technically the sidewalk or the street layout that they've provided, it would require design exception to not have that southern sidewalk. So we can deny that design exception.
I'm sorry, would you say that one more time? That in order to have it just on the north side, that requires a design exception?
Yes.
And has that design exception already been granted by staff or recommended by staff, or are we about to make that approval or denial?
We would probably
Or would
do
that
it
be
with
in
the
final
public,
plat?
It would be with the public improvement plans, which come in with the final plat.
Got it. So if I respect the concerns from Commissioner Flagg and Commissioner Kohler to require a parking lot, sidewalk on the southern side, we're not putting a condition that could not happen. In fact, maybe it's a condition that would be more in line with the code or typical recommendations.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. Can I have the applicant, civil engineer come on up, or engineer come up? Hey.
Good evening, Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, thanks. Boy, we really want this sidewalk on the southern side of Bryan Avenue. Can you guys make that happen?
Potentially. It provides a lot more flexibility for the lots along the southern side if it's not there, just for driveway access and items like that. And one thing I would like to note is we're not planning to put in an assisted living facility or anything like that for the multifamily unit. It's more so like the age-restricted multifamily. You see the 55-plus communities. Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. No, thank you. I'm not sure that impacts my decision too much, actually. Maybe it adds more reason why we should. Can you talk me out of it, though? Tell me why this sidewalk on the southern aspect is problematic, or what am I missing? You're the one looking at the paper, the maps closer. What am I missing?
We feel that it provides adequate circulation for pedestrians with having the north side of the sidewalk and mid-block ramps with adequate signage and or speed bumps or other traffic mitigation that we could put in Bryan Avenue to satisfy what the southern lots would require.
Okay. Is it a cost savings? You said that it gives greater flexibility by not having it for the future tenants or projects. Can that be managed?
It could be,
okay.
Yes.
Would adding a sidewalk on the southern aspect potentially be a value add to the project? And increase that pedestrian access throughout your development?
It would increase pedestrian access along our property, providing an access on the north and south side. I don't know if it is necessary.
Sure.
Also, it would potentially make, with the lot configuration that we have now, the daycare lot becomes more limited in the area, developable area.
Got it, but you would work around that. You'd make it work.
There's potential.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think with that feedback, then I'm inclined to amend the motion per Commissioner Flagg and Commissioner Kohler's feedback. Forgive me, Chairman, I don't know what the most proper way of doing that is, but I'd be happy to amend it to include an additional third condition which requires the.
Can I ask a quick question? Can you wait a few minutes? We need to go through his motion first. Following that, and if it gets seconded, then there will still be another time for discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, given the feedback from the applicant and from our city staff, I'd be inclined to add a third condition, amend my motion to add a third condition requiring a sidewalk on the southern aspect of Bryan Avenue.
I will go ahead and second that. And so we can continue on with the discussion. I do have questions now. So when I'm looking at the attachment to preliminary site plan, Lot 4, Block 2 is where the age-restricted multifamily is going to be, correct?
Correct.
And the Pocket Park is Lot 3, Block 2.
Correct.
Which is on basically the northeast section of that, and you don't have to cross or even get onto Bryan potentially to access it from the multifamily age restricted, correct?
Correct.
And the Lot 1, Block 2 is the medical facilities of some sort that are going to be going in there. And once again, it looks like, especially for the people who are in the multifamily section, they wouldn't walk up to Bryan to walk around Bryan to get to there. There's probably, I'm going to guess, and at this point, since there's no roads, it's going to have to be handled on a lot-by-lot basis. But I would hope then that going from lot 4, block 2 to lot 1, block 2, there would be some kind of sidewalk going straight across so you wouldn't have to hit Bryan, correct? And the same thing with the babysitting, lot 2, block 2. I'm looking at it, if I'm going to go there from lot 4, block 2, I'm probably not even going to go out to Bryan. I'm trying to get a feeling for what really the use is for the north side of Bryan, because if you have somebody in the multifamily section, even if they're trying to get out to 119, they're probably either going to go up Common, they're probably going to go on a crosswalk and hit Bryan right around East County line, or maybe it looks like between lot 2, block 2, lot 3, block 2, and then above it, lot 4, block 1, lot 5, block 1, there might be a road that goes up to 119. I'm just trying to look at, if we require this, what's the use case for it? We're really worried, the big worry was with the multifamily age restricted, but there's not going to be many cases where they're going to walk up to Bryan and then follow it and then take it back north. I mean, the only use case would be if you go from the medical facility and you want to walk, I guess, over to Walmart, but then again, there's probably more likely than not going to be a walkway through the multifamily. And the multifamily is going to have a road inside of it, correct?
Correct, and it will also have to have, I mean, it's not under development at this time, but appropriate site amenities, because the part that is proposed to serve this subdivision is not being dedicated as an outlot, it's being dedicated as a lot, meaning that the multifamily will also need to make sure it has appropriate pocket park facilities for the number of units that it is proposing. So there will be amenities such as a park within the multifamily as per code requirements.
Okay. That is all I had. Commissioner Lukash.
Thank you, Chair. Kristen, so is it lot 2, block 2, the one with the daycare? Is that correct?
I believe
On the south side?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So I can see them using a sidewalk too. We need to show our future generation that how we build cities and how they should be built and all modes of transportation and keep them active, right?
Definitely.
What if, there might be parents right across County Road 1 that would want to bring their kids to the daycare. They will not have a sidewalk on the south end. So I think that would be useful for everyone. Plus, even after daycare, maybe they'll take them to Sandstone Ranch for more playtime. So I really see a use on the south side of Bryan for a sidewalk.
Commissioner Height.
Thank you. I think the sidewalk on the south side of Bryan is necessary to address now because this is our only chance to address it. We don't know, though we might postulate that there will be sidewalks that connect Lot 4, Block 2 and Lot 2, Block 2 to themselves and to, the medical center, but we don't know that will happen. The only way to assure it is to require it now. That said, if the applicant's civil engineer who wanted to say something wants to come up, I have a question for him or her. You're James, correct?
Yes, sir.
Sir, in your, it's attachment 2 to our packet, your preliminary site plan.
Yep.
Lot 4, Block 2, the south side of Bryan Avenue has something marked as a 5-foot proposed sidewalk. What is that?
That is a sidewalk that we are proposing to connect from Common Drive to the Pocket Park, as requested by the City of Longmont planning staff.
So it just runs from Common west to the end of Block 3, or where that parking, whatever that is?
It will terminate at the end of Lot 3, Block 2 in the proposed condition, at the end of the site amenities.
And so to the extent that this commission wants further south side, it would impact Lot 2, Block 2, Lot 1, Block 2.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And to clarify, Lot 2, Block 2, its intended use is medical office building. Lot 1, Block 2's intended use is daycare.
Okay. So it was flipped
Yes.
in our discussion. Then I want to raise one more question too, because now I'm looking at the outlots, A and B. One of them also serves maybe the Sandstone Marketplace filing 1? Or do they both? And it wasn't operational, at least in the material I recall reading. One of these outlots, which is a stormwater detention pond, hasn't been connected. Are you gonna do that?
There has been discussion with the drainage department with City of Longmont for Outlot A, because the lot to the south of us, which is Lot 1, Block 1, Sandstone Marketplace subdivision filing number 1, has the potential for, we were anticipating they would be constructed prior to us. It is now looking like they might not be. It is a requirement by the City of Longmont that we continue on our runoff onto their site for a clear continuation, where we're going to be controlling the rate of flow as depicted in our drainage report.
So your outlot A is on your property,
Correct. Outlot A
and what it
out.
connects to is not on your property.
Correct.
And it's not up and running yet,
Correct.
the rest of it? What are you gonna do?
We're required to make a clear point of connection for the lot to the south, as I believe.
Do you have to get an easement from them?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. Oh, the easement is already on their plat, which is dedicated.
To you, already?
Yes.
Well, to Sandstone North. Got it.
Correct.
All right, those are the questions I had. Thanks.
I guess, could I ask a quick question to Kristen for some planning criteria? Is that allowed at this point?
As a continuation of my microphone being turned off, which I'm pretending is turned back on, I will allow you to do that.
Okay, thank you. As the lots are going to be developed with each going under the site plan criteria, are they required to provide site circulation to neighboring lots?
Yes.
For sidewalk and pedestrian access? Okay, thank you.
Do we have anybody, Commissioner Flagg?
I wanted to say I do support Commissioner Goldberg's addition of the sidewalk and request it meet city standards.
Okay. Any other comments? I'm just going to say, especially now knowing that it goes halfway already. And knowing that there is, on the individual sites, there are code that they have to follow as far as putting in sidewalks on each of those. I am not for requiring a sidewalk to go from, on the south side of Green Avenue, to go from county line to the pocket park, I guess is what we're looking at. I just don't want to, I just don't feel we need to make that step. So that's my personal feelings for that. So I will be against the amendment for that. Commissioner Flagg.
And I am concerned that the connectivity throughout the site for people who are on the south side trying to get across to use a contiguous and continuous sidewalk is through various crossings of a public street where undoubtedly traffic is trying to get someplace or get away from someplace. And having multiple crossings in mid-block is really never a good, safe option in place of having a continuous sidewalk on the south side there. Requiring that every site connect with the next site over doesn't always result in a uniform walkway that is easy for people to follow. It's not always pedestrian friendly. Having the sidewalk along both sides of a street is good pedestrian access. And I think that's something that's in envisioned Longmont plan, and we should support that.
Commissioner Kolar? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Lukacs.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with Commissioner Flegg on having the connectivity around sidewalks and how it is in Vision Longmont that we must connect neighborhoods and other existing sidewalks to each other. We have, I think the city has a complete streets policy, and I think that would fit in right there as well. So I do support that we require, since this development will not come before us again, and like there's the water easement, that's not going to come to us again for development for platting or anything where we could require a sidewalk. It will be the developer building that part of the development. So I think this is the right time to ask for a sidewalk, and it should be considered part of traffic as well, because we build roads, but roads are not just for motor vehicles, are for other means of transportation as well, and we should consider all of them at the same time when we have the opportunity.
Is there any other discussion? If not, let's go ahead and take a vote.
Commissioner Height?
Will vote aye.
Commissioner Teta?
Aye.
Commissioner Goldberg?
Yes.
Chairman Poland?
Nay.
Commissioner Flegg? Commissioner Lukacs? Commissioner Kohler? Chairman, that passes 6-1 with Chairman Poland dissenting.
Thank you very much. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, June 29th at 8 a.m. and it ends Wednesday, July 5th at 5 p.m. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, applicant. Do we want to stop for a 5-minute break, or can we keep going? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. ready to move on. The next item is item 7, other business, direction to staff to amend PZ bylaws regarding land acknowledgement statement. Glenn Van Den Oigen, Planning Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We put this back on the agenda based on your direction. We just put direction to staff, if you do decide to amend the P&Z bylaws, there are a number of alternatives here, so that's one of them. But as you know, recently, we have to get that out to you 5 days in advance, so we want the formality of you directing us to make a change to the P&Z bylaws. But there's other alternatives. I gave you a few that are internally to our organization. The Museum Board states the land acknowledgement at the bottom of the agenda. That's one option. And then on the other end of the scale, I believe it's the Sustainability Board actually puts it a part of their agenda, and then they rotate as far as their commissioners that make that statement at every meeting. The council wanted it really to be kind of your decision, but they want you to be authentic about it and how you use it. We did get a little bit more follow-up from Sandy Cedar, who was involved in putting together and getting council's motion on it. Her feeling was that council's feeling is for special occasions that it should be used in those cases. In our case, and I gave you another example of that, we pass land use policies on land. We have the STEAM sub-area plan. I gave you an example of Telluride. That's also a land use plan where they state it as a part of that motion. Or right now you do it individually at commissioners, where you have the items from the commission. So with that, I'll just kind of step back and see what you want to do.
Thank you. We'll open up for discussion. Commissioner Flagg.
Thank you. I've thought about this over the last weeks a lot, and I even thought that perhaps it should be posted, since we do a lot with land use, as people come in for a meeting, and that it would be actually up on our screens as they come in, to be upfront about it. After all, Chief Nawat, this was probably his hunting grounds, quite literally, from everything I've read. So that would be what I would think. Lacking that, I do like the idea of having it printed on the bottom of our agenda for everyone to see.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? I think there are some things we can do down the road, and looking into whether there's any ancestral sites that are actually acknowledged here in the Longmont area, to if there's any concerns for archaeological issues. But I think that's something a little further down the road. I think for this first pass and putting it at the bottom of our agenda is one idea, yes. Commissioner Goldberg.
Thanks, Chairman. Glenn, how the city council adopted this in 2021 or something like that. What are they doing with it? I know that they've left it up to us to determine how our commission should apply it or deploy it or implement it, but what is city council doing with this land acknowledgement?
I believe, I haven't seen it used, but we have had various events with folks from the Arapaho tribe.
Sure.
I believe they use it in special events. Sandy mentioned that they potentially would use it in a ribbon cutting. I couldn't tell you when they've done that, but it's not part of their agenda.
They're not putting it on their agenda. They haven't put it into their, I assume they have their own bylaws or regs that they follow.
Correct, and no, they have not amended their bylaws or anything.
Okay, and just to be clear, the recommendation or the discussion here around the bylaws would be, one of your proposed options would be for us to actually add it to our bylaws, perhaps a new section 17, land acknowledgement and then a mention of it in that live permanently in our bylaws.
Well, I was thinking actually if you change your agenda so that it's a part of your agenda every meeting, that would be an amendment to the bylaws.
I see, not adding it into the bylaws, adding it to our agenda each time.
Right,
Whether we say it or it's just posted at the bottom.
right.
Cool, you've provided examples of both. Admittedly, I too have been noodling on it as well, and appreciate Commissioner Lukacs and team bringing it to us. I'm a little bit torn, actually. The first thing I'd love to explore would be, or what I would expect from, would be kind of a citywide, consistent plan. City council puts it on their agenda, all the advisory boards put it on their agenda, and there's, just something that's kind of standard across all of the commissions. That's what I would expect, and maybe what I think would make the most sense, rather than doing these one-offs. Is one advisory committee more sensitive to the historical realities than another? So I'm trying to see if I lost Jed Height already, but maybe he's having technical issues. Anyways, so I would just love to see consistency. I also have some concerns. If we put it on our agenda or we put it into our bylaws, I go back to kind of maybe what Glenn was saying from Sandy about authenticity. I guess my question to the commission is, would we ever make a decision or impact our judgment or impact a decision on a project before us because of this? And so is there some feeling of like, cool, we can put it on our agenda, but does it really dictate our purview and how we kind of make decisions? And so I just would like to hear from the rest of the commission if they have any concerns about that or thoughts about that. Maybe I'll stop there and see where it goes.
Thank you. Commissioner Lukacs?
Thank you, Chair. To quickly answer your question, Commissioner Goldberg, I think this falls under equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we have to be cognizant of that when we make decisions. So it could fall under that bigger umbrella. And, not to be just cognizant of age, race, gender, but also of history of the land. So I think that's where it falls. And as far as the city council not using it at every council meeting, I think there was some instruction not to tokenize this land acknowledgement and use it over and over again, and just flows by over our heads and not really paying attention to what we're saying and why we're saying it. But the city council meets more than we do, and I think that's a reason. That's my guess why they're not saying it at every meeting. And I don't think they're meeting every week now, but it's pretty often, right? Definitely more than we are, or other boards. It just happens that this summer we have like 2 every month, but sometimes we have cancellations. So, maybe at max would be 12 times a year. So I do think it should be on our agenda. And frankly, it's been a process for me to come to this proposal, to bring it to us for discussion. And one of the things that motivated me was I attended a conference, and at the beginning of the conference, they read their own land acknowledgement, and that just sparked an idea for me. So I hope that us reading it will spark some idea for others that are in the room or watching. Someone might feel compelled to speak. If they were not planning, but they heard this and like, oh, maybe I should speak about something. Or maybe they will not speak because they heard the land acknowledgement. So hopefully we can move some thoughts around land use with it. for people coming before us. So that's one of my hope, and obviously to educate us, because I know not many of us knew about this land acknowledgement, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there in the city that don't know about it. So it's an opportunity for us to educate the others as stewards of the land that we are.
Commissioner Height.
So of course I tried to rewrite it. Well, I think it's a significant issue. It's coincident with a lot of interesting history of the United States of America, and Longmont, Colorado in particular. And this acknowledgement is exactly that. But what it says is that we are going to try to acknowledge and respect the history of indigenous peoples that were here before us, and acknowledge the fact that they were brutally dispossessed of their lands. This commission deals with current land use issues. The historical foundation upon which it's built should acknowledge the history of what others did before us, and acknowledge as well that we kind of decimated, or that history has been decimated, and it would be nice to acknowledge that. So my rewrite is to be much more direct, which is, it didn't change much, but I tried to be blunt. As well, I think, why not put it everywhere? We could put it on our agenda, that's no big deal. We could put it in our bylaws, that's not a big deal. But as Commissioner Lukash said, why couldn't it be in here, in this room, when we're making decisions? Or on the door, or whatever.
There's actually one right outside the door.
I didn't know that. Is that this acknowledgement, or is it something else?
But I think that was done by the city council's direction, correct? To kind of, one of the steps that they took to commemorate it. Yeah, let me go ahead and get you.
Well, I'm also cognizant of, not making it flippant, or not making it not mean anything by just giving it lip service. I hope that by publishing it more, it doesn't just become lip service, but that people see it. It would be, that's my position.
Yeah, I was wondering about your rewrite. Is it okay if we rewrite it since the council adopted it in this form? I know they went to a great length to come up with this language, and they consulted with NARF and the tribe, and they got their approval. So can we change it, or?
I don't know. I did share Commissioner Height's draft with Carmen Ramirez, who presented this. She liked it. She suggested another change, and it was right before I walked in here, basically said, this would be fine if it was spoken. I don't know if there's some significance, whether we use Commissioner Height's in a spoken manner, yet we use council's in a written manner. We'd have to check and I guess vet that.
Okay, Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah. Admittedly, I'm afraid that I'm on the wrong side of history here. My concern, I recognize the magnitude and the atrocities, and so I respect that. My only questions that I'm going to continue to raise are around the implication or the application, and what is most appropriate for this deciding body. Should it be written on the bottom of our agenda but not spoken? Maybe. Should we recite it before every meeting? I'm not sure that sits well with me. I'm not sure. I feel like when we come here, our decisions are based off of like the land use code and Vision Longmont, and these are the kind of like criteria that we have before us. We don't say the Pledge of Allegiance. We don't raise concerns around atrocities to African American people in our past. We don't raise concerns about minorities that have been wronged. I recognize that this is unique to maybe a uniquely unique stain on Longmont's history, so maybe it's more relevant here. I just want to be mindful of how we apply it. I would love to see this land acknowledgement code put in Envision Longmont. I would like to see it added as one of our bylaws, number 17, where it lives on kind of indefinitely, and we can always reference it when we're making decisions. I'm not sure that reading it every meeting will give it honor, or might it dilute the importance or the value or the power of it when it is spoken. And so I guess I'm turning to my peers for just kind of setting me straight on. I recognize that I could be on the wrong side here, so I just need to hear from the rest of the commission.
Commissioner Kolar?
So I agree with everything that's said here. I think it would be great to have it on the agenda. We might be most of the audience that looks at the agenda, but occasionally, you know, maybe the public will see it and maybe ask themselves, like you're saying, oh, what's this about, and look more into it. I like Commissioner Flagg's idea of having it on the screens maybe when we first come in, just as a reminder to all of us that it's, you know, it's present. But I do agree with you that reading it every time might get redundant and it just get kind of washed out. So I was wondering if maybe we read it whenever we annex something. It's sort of a bigger moment where the city is encompassing more land. And then when we vote to approve annexation or recommend approval, maybe you read it then. Just an idea.
Anything else? Okay, Commissioner Flake?
My thought, I'm referencing here the Longmont Museum Advisory Board, and I really like the way they've done it because they listed the mission statement. I think we have something like that for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then with the land acknowledgement below that, I think that creates the context under which we would plan, on which we respond to plans submitted and so on. But I also agree that if you read it, eventually people are like, okay, they're going to read this again. I don't want to lessen the impact. If they have to read it themselves, I think that's a greater impact than just listening, because we have so much noise around us now that if they read it, perhaps that has more impact.
Commissioner Height?
I just wanted to, I think I agree with Josh's statement that it doesn't govern what we decide. It's not a review criterion, but it is important nonetheless, especially in the context of what it is that we do decide. Commissioner Kohler's recommendation or suggestion that we deal with it at annexations is a great idea. I was to read it at that particular point in time because it has some significance as we're bringing something into the municipal jurisdiction of the city of Longmont. I was also going to say that if we read it at least once a year, you know, at the first meeting of the year, would be a great time, I think, to remind ourselves what we're doing in the future, in the next 12 months. And again, I don't know that my rewrite is necessary. There's something that's been standardized, and that's okay. If someone wanted to read it differently, I mean, if I were called to read it, I'd probably read it the way I wrote it. But it's not, unfortunately, a review criterion. I don't know that it could be, but it should be in the back of our minds, guiding us in our thoughts.
Commissioner Lukash.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Goldberg, I don't think there's a wrong side. I don't think you're on the wrong side. I think we're all on a journey. We're all on the spectrum of discovering what this means, what our history is, what can we do about it. So I think we're all on a journey. So no matter where you are, I think you're right, as long as you acknowledge that these things happen, right? So it doesn't. You don't have to agree with everyone. So that's okay. And you don't have to agree with me either, and I'm okay with that. I do like the examples of adding it at the beginning, to recite it at the beginning of the year when we go through our bylaws and we're reminded of why we're here and and how we do things. And for special occasions, maybe annexations, or I don't know what other special occasions we might have. Yeah, again, I don't want us to tokenize it and say it too often. But having it on the agenda, definitely, I think there is an agenda printed on the table with the sign-up sheets, so people can see it there for sure. And if we can have it on the screen, I'm fine with that too.
Do we have any other comments? How do we do a motion? Yeah.
Right, it would be direct staff, and what I heard is on the bottom of the agenda, possibly at a read with annexations, and then first meeting of the year when we readopt the bylaws.
Yeah. Do we I guess if we put it in the bylaws, and as Josh said, as items 17
happens to be the next one.
It's at the bottom of the bylaws, but if we put it there, I guess then it is a reminder for us to do it at the first meeting of the year when we approve the bylaws.
We'll look at and see where it fits in, yeah.
So I think we're pretty much in general agreement about the agenda. I guess the only thing we need to talk about, decide, is if we want to do it on items like annexation. And if there's, I guess, a majority who would like to move forward with that. Well, so as we did in the first meeting, and even the last couple of meetings, I believe we have had one of the commissioners during the commissioner time, as moved, read it. It's not formal that way, but then it's on individual commissioners as they feel moved at the end of the meeting if they want to go ahead and read it. Commissioner Goldberg first.
Thanks, Chairman. Glenn, are we the deciding body on an annexation, or are we a recommendation?
Your recommendation.
Okay. I don't know if that really impacts my decision, but, I think it dilutes the power of our statement if we read it on a recommendation and then it gets denied. Maybe that's all in my head. But I think I'm tracking with the majority of my peers here where adding it to our agenda, or maybe I'll talk to my chairman here. I think I'm aligned here with adding it to our agenda. Certainly, any commissioners can read whatever they want during the items from the commission at the end of the meeting. No problem. It could be during Indigenous Peoples Month or week or day, or, it could be any time when it's feeling like it's really, touching you close, then you can elect to read it. So I think adding it to the agenda maybe shows some of that consistency that I'm looking for across the other advisory committees. It keeps it at the forefront of our mind, as Commissioner Height has reinforced the importance of. Reading it, you know, the chairman can opt to, or we can require to read it in January when we, you know, call our meetings, or like appoint our chairman and vice chairman and do kind of our business set for the rest of the year. It seems like a good opportunity to do it. I don't know if we're permitted to add it to our actual bylaws as bylaw number section 17. Is there a reason why we couldn't? Does it have to be a review criteria for it to be in our bylaws? I know it's not code. Okay. Can you, is it referenced in, I think Envision Longmont predated this land acknowledgement. Has it been referenced, or will it be added at the next comp plan, or has there been any proposal to revise Envision to include it?
Not specifically.
Okay.
We are tentatively planning to take it on next year, a revision to Envision, revision to Envision.
Revision.
So I think it's certainly appropriate to add it in.
Okay. Well, I think I've shared my feelings, and I appreciate the discussion from the rest of the commission.
Commissioner Lukash.
Do we make recommendations to the code, like the comp plan and the land use code, land development? Maybe we could read it then in those meetings. When you'll bring Envision, Longmont, because those are bigger, more conceptual, general details. Well, it's nice.
Well, you will see, before Envision, you'll see STEAM and the Sugar Factory sub-area plan. So there's an opportunity there. Most of the code amendments to Chapter 15 you see and you make a recommendation on, but not all. So it's kind of hit and miss.
Glenn, would we ask the planning department if we want this to be in the revision Envision? Can we make a request to the planning department on adding it in?
Sure. You'll be very much a part of that process.
Okay.
You'll have more than enough opportunities.
So we can do it at that time. We don't have to decide that now.
No.
Okay. Commissioner Goldberg.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm inclined to make a motion, but actually I prefer it to come from Commissioner Lukash. And so I'll yield the mic, but I don't know if there's a polite way to say, come on, Commissioner Lukash, make a recommendation here.
Commissioner Lukash.
I talked so much about it that fine. Let's see. So I'll make a motion to add the land acknowledgement to our bylaws to be on our agenda. Have it displayed at the beginning of do we want that? No, so there's two things. What else? Bylaws, agenda. Yeah, and maybe we'll leave at the discretion of the chair or planning director when we read it to decide if that's a special occasion or no.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just the chair. I mean, any commissioner can always bring it up if they think it's an appropriate discussion point.
Right.
So.
At any item or?
And not at any item. If you think that it's appropriate, a commissioner, you can, as you're asking questions and talking about things, you can always.
Right, but we don't need to add that in the.
Not formally.
Formally, right. So I think we'll be just to add it into the bylaws and the agenda,
I think,
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Commissioner Goldberg.
I think I have one final, I think I'd make a recommendation to Commissioner Lukacs. I would humor a third condition, which is to have it read aloud during our January meeting.
I agree with that, and let's add that to,
Okay,
to the motion.
so we have the three motions. So we have the motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Flagg.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion, or we are ready for a vote? Jane.
Commissioner Height. Aye. Commissioner Teta.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Yes.
Chairman Poland.
Aye.
Commissioner Flagg.
Aye.
Commissioner Lukacs. Commissioner Kohler. Chairman, that passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. That is the end of our other business. Next item is final call, public invited to be heard. There is nobody left here besides the commission, so I will open it and say nobody move forward. I will go ahead and close final call, public invited to be heard. Next item is items from the commission. Commissioner Lukacs.
I heard the word commissioners, and I thought you passed that. Sorry. Yeah, we talked a lot about charrettes last week. And I was wondering if our director could talk more about how does the city use charrettes? Do we require charrettes for developments or not? Do we use them just for big redevelopments? It seems like the audience, or part of the audience, was in agreement that they really help to bring the people and the developer together. And there's a lot of, there are lots of articles out there that support charrettes in planning. So I was wondering, what's the statement of the city? Where do you guys stand on that?
Well, this is the only one that I'm aware of that we've done. And it really, as you heard, it was some residents that were in the Bond Farms that brought it forward to the developer, and then they agreed. So we really had no role in asking for that to be done. Now, we were present as a resource, because invariably code questions come up, but no, we weren't a part of that. We didn't require it. It hasn't been a part of our, this is what you must do. It's certainly part of long-range planning activities like Envision or the sugar mill. But no, it's not a requirement. And if we did require it, we would be amending the code. And as you mentioned, it's not cheap. They hired, I think, a couple of architectural professors out of CU that led the process. So I don't know what that price tag was, but Jennifer's going to find out for us.
Yeah, I think they mentioned that for the second charrette, they could apply for some grant that would support that. There was somewhere in all the documentation it was mentioned that, which that's awesome that there is support out there. But are there cities or other municipalities that require charrettes? Is that something common with other cities?
I'm not familiar with it. No.
Okay.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, Commissioner Lukacs, I appreciate your line of questioning because it was new to me too. I think what's important to recognize, I was feeling I had mixed emotions about it as it continued to come up and then continued to be considered as like a potential condition and a requirement. But I want to be abundantly clear, or maybe I want Glenn to be abundantly clear. There's no obligation by the applicant to respect any of the feedback that they get during a charrette or to apply any learnings from a charrette. It is really a forum for the public to provide feedback and theoretically work collaboratively with the applicant, but there's no muscle, if you will, when it comes to our reviewing the project.
That's correct.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll move on. Council Representative Rodriguez is not here. And items from Planning Director Glenn Van Nimwegen.
I don't have anything.
Next month, 1 or 2 meetings.
I don't think we know yet. Potentially the first meeting you will have off, which I think is the 17th, is that 19th? But we're pretty sure you will have a case on the second meeting. A lot of that hinges on what happens with Boulder County regarding the Kanemoto open space easement. And I believe that's scheduled for July 5th.
Okay.
So we will know more next week.
Okay, thank you. Seeing nothing else, we are in adjournment.